Welcome to the Retail is Detail podcast. I'm your host, Jamie Hamer. This is where we go beyond the headlines and get into how great retailers and tech innovators really think, from trading to teams to business building to tech, loyalty, and data. Every Monday afternoon, I talk to the people building, running, and reinventing retail, unpacking what's working, what's changing, and what's next. If you care about the detail of retail, you're in the right place. My guest today is Dan Coleman, consultant, strategist, and longtime member of the Chartered Institute of Marketing and a fellow of the Institute of Data and Marketing. Most people know him as the Wizard because he has a rare ability to step into an e-commerce operation and immediately spot the problems that everyone else has missed. For more than 20 years, he's been rebuilding product data, fixing broken sites, guiding teams, and helping retailers get real value from Magento, Shopify, WooCommerce, BigCommerce, and others. Dan speaks at major industry events, works with brands of every size, and is known for audits that reveal the truth that teams avoid. Dan, welcome to Retail is Detail.
Thanks for having me, Jamie.
If you had to shake a retailer awake today, what's one truth about online growth that they typically refuse to hear?
It seems obvious, but the one thing that is missed, particularly in kind of early days in the retail journey, is like an absolute focus on profit, right? And I don't just mean kind of your overall sort of business profits, but getting down to that. What are the margins at a SKU level? What can you actually afford to be spending to generate a sale for whatever it is in your range? And obviously, the more complex the range you've got, the more complex that calculation becomes. And then the more kind of complex your whole sort of marketing stack has to become to accommodate that.
And what are the hidden costs that retailers often don't take into account?
I'm going to kind of approach this from a slightly different direction, because it is something that that comes up a lot. And so one of the biggest things is when you're looking at marketing channels is a focus on ROAS rather than kind of the actual contribution that you're getting back into the business. So hidden cost number one is actually having kind of the wrong metrics in order to set your business up for growth.
Okay. So a lot of the time, retailers are just looking at the top line and not taking into account the rest of the profit equation.
Yeah. And I think it's probably unfair to say that the retailers themselves are naive to profit, right? But I think the more complex your marketing stack gets, and the more kind of, particularly the more externals that you've got in the mix and maybe being managed by different kind of internal stakeholders and that kind of thing, there's kind of a wider distance from that kind of core profit kind of objective and the objectives that you're actually setting throughout the business. So I'm a big believer in actually having fewer like KPIs, if you like, but making sure that everything that cascades down through the e-commerce team can be traced right back up to these kind of core KPIs, whichever they might be. It might be growth, it might be efficiency, but in almost all cases, it's going to have some sort of profit objective in there somewhere, right?
Okay. Makes sense. We'll come back to business simplification and the tools you can use today. But you've been in this game since the 90s. What's one belief that you scared here? What's one belief that you developed really early on, which still guides everything you do today?
So let's talk about what e-commerce was like in the 90s when I first started, because I'm sure some of the listeners won't actually have been in the game back then or really kind of understand quite how different a world it was. So when I first got started, the reason I found myself working in e-commerce was I actually came in from an IT background. And back in those days, as businesses were starting to get involved in putting up websites and things like that, the internet ran on computers, so they would give it to IT and it would become an IT project. And for me, that was kind of a fascinating opportunity, right, to kind of jump in and do something a bit more interesting than kind of CRM databases and the type of stuff I was doing at the time. Now, the world back then, we had to kind of hand roll everything, right? We didn't have e-commerce platforms. We didn't even have analytics. We didn't even have a common vocabulary, right? So my first e-commerce job, we were kind of inventing the metrics that were going to be important to us. They would be familiar today, things like conversion rate, but we weren't calling it conversion rate. We were calling it the browse to buy ratio, right? We were just kind of finding our way through. And a lot of that involved a lot of DIY type hand-rolled solutions, hand-rolling analytics packages, for example, in the days before Google Analytics. And I think that is something that's really kind of stuck with me all the way through my career. The fact that you can solve problems in a way that doesn't actually require you to necessarily go and source an agency, go and buy yet another platform, go and pay yet another subscription. There are times, absolutely, when that makes perfect sense. But there are other times when actually, if you're just wanting to kind of test something, or you want to get hold of some kind of new data in a new way, you don't need to go out and necessarily buy the tool to do that until you've proven that it's going to be useful to you. And then you find ways to kind of bring in the right the right software, the right services, and things like that.
Okay, so that speaks to the idea of, A/B testing, doing what you can and proving there is a market for what you're doing before you go ahead and try and scale it.
Yeah, so some of the fastest moving retailers I work with, and some of these are quite big. We're talking big by UK standards. We're talking annual revenues well in excess of 50 million a year, who will still be. There'll be kind of people in their tech teams who are just hand rolling stuff and just very much MVPing stuff quite quickly, being able to, having enough of a kind of understanding of the full kind of depth of their tech stack to know that they can do things safely. And that's kind of key. You can't introduce kind of security issues by just letting anyone hack out any kind of anything that they decide to vibe code, right? But if you have the right kind of skill set and you have the right people who really understand the tech stack well and how it all fits together, and have the skills to be able to build on top of that, then you can iterate very, very quickly. Yeah, and I see that is often the difference between the retailers that are kind of growing a lot more quickly and those who are just kind of they'll maybe get in the 10, 15 points a year growth and thinking that's a massive win. But, the ones that are really kind of accelerating well beyond that, they've either got something particularly advantageous to them in the market, or they are just able to iterate so quickly, do that whole fail fast thing, and then move on to the next thing if their idea is unproven.
And how do you set up your tech stack to be able to iterate and test fast?
I mean, that's the $1 million question, right? So it's the challenge is the bigger you get, the more technical debt you've got. But you just need to make sure that however you are delivering your e-commerce platform and your kind of associated tech stack, it's got to match your culture, right? And that's fundamental. If your culture is a little bit kind of punk rock, shall we say, and you want to kind of DIY and move quickly, don't go out doing going for like massive, complex, like huge sort of I don't know, IBMs of the kind of the e-commerce world, right? Whereas if you are a little bit more on the kind of the cautious and the sort of the a secure big kind of corporate side, then maybe that's the right route for you. But then you've got to make sure that you've resourced up accordingly for what you're looking to do. So nothing is so big and so complex that you can't iterate quite quickly if you've got the will and the structure to do it. But if you have not built that structure and not resourced up your team accordingly, skills-wise, right people in there, maybe the right volume of people in the team, maybe the wrong fit of agencies that you've got out there and in the mix and stuff like that, then you're just going to be you're going to be fighting an uphill battle. And so if that's really what you're wanting to do, and I'm still a great believer that you'll have a lot more fun and you'll get a lot better results if you are able to kind of iterate quite quickly. Then you want to be making sure that you've built a kind of a culture around your e-commerce team that allows you to do that. and that when you are kind of sourcing in the third parties that you're going to be working with, that they also match those abilities and those kind of ambitions.
So does that mean that a lot of the consultancy you're doing is cultural rather than technical?
I would say it falls kind of somewhere in the middle. I tend to be brought in to fix these issues that don't really have a particular owner. And the reason they don't have an owner is because they'll typically fall between two stools. So it might be something that is somewhere between tech and marketing, or it might be, as you say, it might be something that's kind of a cultural issue as opposed to a capability issue necessarily. There's some sort of kind of mismatch there. So yeah, I do get invited into to talk a lot about what is the difference between us and someone who is kind of a benchmark, right? So yeah, it can be cultural.
Interesting. And, having seen the e-commerce world evolve over the last 20 years, what is the single biggest innovation that's happened that changed the game?
I mean, the biggest innovation that really is the rise of search engines, right? I literally started. I was building my first e-commerce website the day that Google launched in the UK, so that's how far back I go. So I've seen that kind of evolution of Google becoming the dominant search engine, and then all of the things that they've done to kind of change the game over the years. And obviously, it's happening again. We've got this whole shift towards AI and how people are discovering products that they want to purchase is all kind of rapidly changing again. It's that kind of that constant change in how we actually interact with data on the web. The other big one, I think, is which came a little bit after, was probably the rise of social media as well. So those are the two big ones, which, you ask about e-commerce, these are arguably not really e-commerce topics, but they are the things that have really kind of shaken the world up quite significantly.
So your nickname is the Wizard, and
Yeah.
apart from the appearance, for anyone listening in, Dan has majestic silver locks and a fine bushy silver beard. But is there another story there, or is it just the combination of excellence and the look?
It's exactly that, honestly. So the beard this is a lockdown thing, right? The beard. The hair has been there a bit longer. Lifelong heavy metal fan. So as soon as I got to a point in my career where I didn't need to worry about looking too corporate, I started growing my hair out again. But then lockdown, I grew the beard, and I was working fairly regularly with an agency, just kind of white labeling some services for them. And we'd be getting onto calls with clients or clients of theirs. And their marketing director just started introducing me as the Wizard, and it just coincided with the fact that I had the beard and the grey locks. But also, he would then use that as a kind of story about the wizard can solve the problems that no one else can, that kind of stuff. And so I just started leaning into it, really. Updated my LinkedIn title, and then it just kind of stuck and grew from there. But if you were to go onto your favorite search engine now and look for Coleman the Wizard, pretty much dominate it. So,
Nice.
it's definitely a nice marketing hook for me.
Look, you've audited hundreds of sites. What's the quickest tell for you that a retailer doesn't actually understand how their customers shop?
Funnily enough, you can often tell that before you even get into the data and start auditing, right? Quite often you can tell that for me, the audit starts actually from the initial conversation before you've even got access to the data, their analytics, all that kind of thing. And so I like to kind of simplify things, right? So the first thing you need to understand about when you're trying to make a sale is, do I even have the right to ask for this sale, right? And by that, it could be, there are things that we talk about like product market fit and stuff like that, traditional sort of, is there actually a need for this? But then it's things like, is my proposition even attractive enough I particularly see this with brands who are moving into D2C and uh, doing a load of wholesale. Um, they already have some established kind of routes to market, right? And particularly if Amazon's in the mix, and then they'll realize that, oh, we could keep more of the profit if we were to sell direct to the consumer. There's loads of people buying our products, so let's kind of get online here and spin up a Shopify store or whatever, and we'll start to sell to the consumer. Invariably, they can't compete with Amazon as far as convenience goes. They may have a product that is typically going to be just kind of, it's a fairly consumable type thing that's just going to be thrown in the basket when someone's shopping for other things. Why would they go to a destination website just to purchase this particular thing? So that kind of thing. I mean, you ask about the tell. The biggest tell to start with is not understanding that there's already an established market that is eating their lunch that they need to compete with. I think that's really the best way to kind of summarize that. When it comes to their own websites, it could be a whole mix of things. Have they tried kind of reinventing like how people shop online? I see this less now with the rise of platforms and kind of frameworks and stuff like that. We're all used to kind of C-shaped nav and stuff like that. But certainly a few years ago, in kind of startup-y world, and I did some work with a few fairly well-funded kind of VC-backed startups, and they would think, oh, our USP is we have an e-commerce website that doesn't look like an e-commerce website. Why would you do that? Let's just produce things, put things up there that people are familiar with. Why are we erecting barriers?
Yeah, Amazon's kept its somewhat questionable UX for a long time because of the familiarity,
right? Absolutely.
Let's talk platforms. So Magento, Shopify, WooCommerce, BigCommerce, they've all got their own personality, strengths and weaknesses. Which one causes the most hidden trouble?
It depends what you're asking me to do. Right? I think with Shopify, if someone is just wanting to get a store up quickly and get moving and is not needing to deviate from kind of the way Shopify expects you to do things, it's great. If you start getting more complex, if your catalog has loads of different attributes and stuff like that, or I'm going to say this and hope that Sam Wright, your previous guest, isn't listening in. If you want to do SEO, it's not the best platform. I know that Sam and I debate this all the time. Whereas Magento, the headaches there really are about making sure that you've got an appropriately skilled kind of development and DevOps and hosting and all of that kind of stuff. It is more complex, but with that complexity comes potential, but you got to need that potential, right? It goes back to what I said earlier, really, about the kind of the cultural fit. So any platform will be the right platform for you if it's the right cultural fit. And there is no kind of one size fits all or one right answer. Quite often I'll start a consultancy engagement with a conversation along the lines of, so Dan, what's the best e-commerce platform? Okay, you're going to give me anything else to go on? We're weighing up Magento versus Shopify. What should we go for? It's almost impossible to answer that question without really knowing what the capabilities, the ambitions, what the business is actually set up to do. Even things like how you're going to be getting your products to market and which channels you're going to be using and things like that can all have a bearing on which one's going to be the right platform for you.
Okay, great. If every retailer had to delete a tactic that they rely on, what tactic would instantly make most businesses healthier?
I am really quite anti-affiliates.
Okay.
Um, I think I have worked with a few too many retailers who've been kind of quite burned by some quite sketchy tracking in the kind of affiliate world.
Yeah.
I know that it can work well, but I think the problem is the value people think they're getting from affiliates, and the way the affiliate market has gone over the last 10 years or so is kind of quite often mismatched. They are quite often becoming just a route to hack into your margin, because so many of these affiliate sites now are just voucher code sites. So
Right.
you're paying for the affiliate network, you're paying for the commission for the click, and you're paying for the discount you're giving away. So you're essentially taking 3 hits on your sale, right? So I think the traditional kind of value that we used to have from affiliates has largely been replaced by some strong influencer type relationships instead.
Mhm.
They can be used for a lot more of that product discovery type thing. So
Uh,
yeah, that would be the tactic that I would advise anyone who is using affiliates a lot to just really kind of dig into how much value it's truly adding and how much it's taken off their margins.
all right. Influence, not affiliates. Makes sense.
Influencers, so influencers, use influencers as affiliates if you can,
Yeah.
right? I have sometimes got some other concerns about the whole influencer world, but I think it's an easier one to kind of work around the sort of the value that you're looking to get.
Imagine Google removed organic rankings, traffic rankings for a week. Which platforms and retailers survive and which ones collapse?
um, I think we need to qualify that question. They're removing organic rankings. Are we still keeping AI overviews? And are we keeping the new kind of AI mode search that's
Ooh,
rolling out?
interesting. Okay, cool. Don't make my questions complicated, please. Let's say we're keeping the AI search,
Okay.
the Gemini search that comes up there.
Yeah. So largely, it is anyone. There actually depends a lot on the vertical you're in. I won't bore you too much with the kind of the techie stuff. I've been doing a lot of work on the side and kind of looking at how within different kind of product categories, how the likes of ChatGPT and Gemini choose which retailers to surface and things like that. So it's going to depend a lot on which category you're in and how complex your product is and stuff like that, and how much is already being written about it. Largely, what the AI is doing is it's trying to emulate the way that you, as a human, would previously have made your kind of purchase decisions. So let's say I'm purchasing something that's fairly complex, like a guitar or something like that. There's a lot of kind of upper funnel type content that has already been produced, already been consumed into the kind of the model is learning, and a lot of retailers which will then kind of serve the demand of those that type of kind of knowledge once you've kind of boiled it down to a particular brand, particular kind of spec that you're looking for. So those types of retailers, they're going to do all right. The AI is going to kind of point these people to the right product. If you are not in a uh, let's call it quite such a sort of fan servicey type industry, you're just kind of you're selling something fairly basic that wouldn't have a lot of uh, there wouldn't be a reason to write an awful lot of blog content and stuff like that about it. Maybe I don't know, maybe you're selling nails or like screws or some sort of like DIY product, something like that.
Yeah.
You're kind of going to struggle there unless you are already investing a lot in like Google Shopping.
Mm.
There will, I think the AI will have a few select big name retailers that it would kind of that would already be in the model that it would point towards. But yeah, that's probably where the kind of the balance lies, I think.
And does this shift towards, I mean, one of our guests, Salma Howard, is a big fan of saying, there is no page two, right? You're either on the shortlist or you're not. So does this mean that the big retailers are going to get bigger and there's going to be more of a separation in terms of tiering?
It's hard to say. For the AIs to do their job well, there's got to be a route for kind of emerging brands to get in there somehow. Whatever tool we're using to access the information on the web, it's got one job, which is to try and satisfy the human who is interfacing with that tool at that moment in time, right?
Yeah.
Now, as human beings, we would not be particularly satisfied if we were to say, right, 2025, this is it, this is peak, this is now, we're drawing a line under retail. And if you don't exist now and you don't have a profile now, then unlucky. So I think there will always be kind of relearning, new learning, and kind of test and learn that does come in. But there will, and I don't think this is a new thing to do with AI. There is always a challenge in kind of taking on dominant players, particularly in within certain types of markets. So we've been looking at what type of sites are appearing for different types of product category at the moment. One of the categories I looked at was denim jeans. And that was interesting in that you were far more likely to see the likes of the brands like Levi, Wrangler, Lee, and their kind of first-party websites would be cited far more often than in other similar retail searches for different apparel categories or different similar price point searches, where you might end up with either multi-brand specialist retailers or even like more generic, like Amazon and stuff like that. There's still a lot to play for. I think if you can become like the Hoover of whatever category you're in, then it's the dream that a lot of us would have. Even starting from scratch now, you would probably be able to kind of be fairly dominant in your kind of visibility fairly soon.
Now, what is it about jeans that pulls people to brand websites as opposed to Amazon?
I actually think I don't have a conclusive answer for this yet, but I think a lot of the denim brands, they have, whereas most brands will have their e-commerce as a kind of an afterthought. So it's a brand site with a shop bolted on. A lot of the denim brands seem to have gone the other way around, and they probably over the last 5 or so years have become very much an e-commerce first experience. And so they are perceived as a destination to go and make that purchase, as opposed to a destination to learn about this brand.
Okay. So people are transacting on their website. Yeah.
It just goes back to meeting the expectations of the human who is interacting with the AI at any given time. What do I want to do at this moment? And if at that point in time I'm now looking for a transactional interaction with a website, then you're going to send me to somewhere where I'm most likely to make that purchase. So if I'm perceived as a traditional e-commerce store, I'm more likely to be sent there than I would be to, a blog about jeans, for example.
Right. Gotcha. Okay, cool. So if brands want more transactions, then they need to make it an incredible transactional journey so that more people do it and AI picks up on that.
So I think there's a big separation that I've observed really over the last couple of years. It really seems to sort of accelerate when Google did their helpful content update and tried really getting a load of AI slop out of the search index. And it just seemed to me that a lot of sites were kind of sending quite confusing signals, and so SEO tactics that maybe worked quite well 3 or 4 years ago, where you would have a blog and you would write a lot of kind of related content to your kind of product category, but non sort of transactional content and non-buyer's journey content. So you'd be writing about the product category rather than about necessarily buyer's guides and how to choose this versus that and that kind of stuff. So if some of these sites, I started seeing that they were losing visibility for a lot of transactional type queries, but gaining visibility for informational type queries. So it seemed to me that they were like the actual kind of, let's call it the type of website became very much more important, and you had to own your type of website. So you either had to say, stick your stake in the ground and say, I am an e-commerce website and I am where you come to buy, or I am an editorial website and I'm where you come to learn. And you can't be both. But older e-commerce tactics were, SEO tactics in e-commerce were quite often to try and do both together.
Yeah.
And they worked for a long time. But then over the last kind of 18 months, 2 years, they really stopped working. So quite like the SEO work that I've been doing with e-commerce brands recently is just helping them to no longer be perceived as an editorial website and actually get some of those transactional clicks and transactional visibility back. And I think, this with AI, with Gemini and ChatGPT and stuff like that, it's just going to become even more important because the way they tend to be kind of organizing the data is through the stages of the funnel. So if you're seen as an editorial site, they might use you to establish kind of the bounds of what someone is looking for when someone's in there going, find me the best X for Y. Okay, in the background, ChatGPT, Gemini will go off and it will read the kind of the editorial sites, see how you define the best X for Y, and then it will go and do the transactional searches for the retailers that are selling the products based on the attributes that have been identified in that initial kind of research phase. Which, if you think about it, it's how we shop anyway. Yeah. It's how we've shopped for years. If I'm looking for a new laptop, you'll do a load of reading about, and narrow down to the specs that you actually want, and then you start searching based on the specs, right? So we're used to shopping that way. It's just really accelerated now.
And because you're not on the website in the first place, there's no benefit to that blog being on that same transactional. So is having blogs there actually now counterproductive to the goal of most websites, e-commerce websites, is to transact, right?
I wouldn't say they're counterproductive. They can still be used to give you a real sort of a kind of authority boost, I suppose. But you have to think about, is this article on my website really serving the needs of people who are coming to this website in order to transact? So it might be buyer's guides, right? A great example. Why certain cohorts or certain audiences should buy this versus that, provided they're all things we sell. Comparisons, all of those kind of things, even kind of competitor comparisons and that kind of stuff. All great if it's kind of central to that mid-funnel sort of decision, right? But just you don't need to become an editorial site, and that's it's definitely one of the mistakes that was being made quite a lot over the last few years, and I still see it a lot today. Selling guitars, you write a load of articles about the top 10 guitar solos. Why? People aren't coming to a retailer site to read about top 10 guitar solos. They're going to Loudwire and Metal Hammer and stuff like that, right? They're going to, the music blogs.
Obviously an area of interest now. Let's talk about complexity in e-commerce. So is e-commerce too complex? And are retailers collapsing and losing profit over because of the complexity that's been introduced by all the tools that are available?
I don't think e-commerce is too complex. I think you can never have too much complexity in this market because you want to be able to solve the problems that you've got in the ways that are most relevant to your business, your objectives, and how you're trying to kind of do business. Where e-commerce can get too complex is when people are layering on complexity that they don't need, just because of shiny thing syndrome, magpie syndrome, whatever you might want to call it. Yeah, I'm all for bringing in interesting solutions and new ways of doing things, and I think it would be it'd be a tragedy if we didn't have the kind of the ability to do that. If everything kind of got consolidated too much, and it's great that we have a fairly fertile e-commerce platform set of choices out there, and new ones emerging all the time. We have new ways of advertising ourselves. We've got even AI. It makes it exciting, right? It gives us a whole new way of helping people discover kind of products and services. But just make sure that you're only layering on complexity when you really need to. I'll give you an example of that. So when I'm doing Google Analytics consultancy, I quite often used to get asked, certainly in the Universal Analytics days, not so much anymore, used to get asked, well, should we be investing in another analytics tool? Or do we need to be upgrading to the GA360? And the response was always, well, you're not even kind of bouncing off the ceiling of Universal Analytics yet. Why are you looking at a new tool? What is it going to give you if you haven't actually established what you can't do with your current tool set? And quite often, people they like to buy in solutions. But then if those solutions take a little bit of work to really make the most out of, they'll look to buy in something else to solve that problem instead. It's much more fun to do that part of the project than it is to actually just kind of farm what you've got.
Are there any specific tools that you're introducing regularly that you want to give a shout out to that people should be considering?
So one I do want to give a shout out to, we put it into Anderton's Music a little while ago. It's called up.ai, which is it's kind of it's for running your Google ads essentially, but very much in an e-commerce e-commerce setting. So you upload not just your product feed as you would do when you're running a kind of a standard Google Ads campaign, but you can bring in all sorts of other kind of data from around your business, like data on your margins. If you've got brick and mortar stores, what you can bring in, like what ranges are actually selling in your offline stores, even if the data doesn't support kind of them being given additional visibility online. Or the algorithms haven't learned that people are wanting to buy this yet. So there's a tendency with the kind of the Google Ads algorithms to kind of favor the kind of the reliable SKUs. So as you're bringing new ones in, they've got to kind of learn whether they are whether they're a safe enough bet. And so what Up does is it's got a load of sort of machine learning. It takes in all of your kind of data sources from around the business, and then it just structures your campaigns and is constantly moving products between different kind of priority campaigns just to try and maximize profit. And we found that switching from actually a very good agency to Up, we still found that for the same spend and largely the same revenue coming in, profit had increased by about 10% just from that channel. That was amazing. It's not right for everyone, I have to say. You've got to have the ability to organize your data in the right way for them to be able to do the job. But if you are the right type of retailer for that type of platform, then great, recommend it.
Awesome. And I've heard a lot about agencies either spinning up products or products replacing agencies in some key tasks where they might do better. What's your biggest frustration or concern with the way that agencies position themselves in 2025?
It's kind of difficult for me to answer because I don't really look at what other agencies, consultants are really doing to position themselves. I I think actually the market is doing a fair job of reacting to challenging times right now. We, for the most part, if we kind of look at broad brush agency world, the right conversations are being had. Some people out there aren't really helping themselves by they're claiming that they have answers where no answers exist, particularly around the topic of kind of AI and search. I think specifically in the e-commerce world, one of the biggest challenges that I come across is having to actually teach agencies what an e-commerce business is all about and how it differs from a different type of business that they might be more used to doing ads or SEO for and that kind of thing. But that's not really a criticism of anyone other than whoever kind of selected an agency that wasn't the right fit with the right skill set, right? I'm very kind of I'm reluctant to kind of be too critical because I think it's a great industry to work in, and I think all providers are pretty kind of supportive and fair with each other for the most part. But yeah, just to make sure that you have I'm going to use that word right again. Make sure you have a right to be going after the business that you are going after. Don't try and be all things to all clients. I know in sales, we always feel that little bit of pain whenever you lose any deal, but actually some deals you should lose.
Yeah, completely. What's one commonly held belief about Google or AI search or search more generally that will look ridiculous in 5 years?
I think there's a lot of conspiracy thinking around Google, right? And particularly within the SEO space. There seems to be, every time Google makes a change, there will always be a big chunk of the kind of the high profile commentators will be saying that, Google have done this because they are deliberately trying to kill XYZ market. And whether that will look ridiculous in 5 years or whether we've just moved on to different conspiracies, I don't know. But I don't think there's someone sat in Google going, hey, now let's kill the SEOs. Yeah, now let's kill recipe websites, all of this kind of stuff. I think that is happening as a byproduct of Google constantly iterating what their capabilities are. Their job is to, when people are interfacing with Google, however that might be, through the website, through the apps on their phone, through their Android devices, Google Maps, whatever it might be, they need to keep people locked into their ecosystem. So their ecosystem has to satisfy their user base. So I think the idea that they are deliberately trying to, just in isolation, make this unilateral decision to kill a particular industry rather than actually making a decision that this will benefit our users, or this will at least keep our users locked into our ecosystem, is probably the way it needs to be thought of.
Yeah, awesome. This is just Google looking out for Google. It's nothing to do with
exactly. We all do it, right?
And what's the question retailers should be asking themselves weekly, but almost never do?
Oh, that's a good question. I think, okay, now this doesn't apply to all retailers, but I think there is a lack of foresight in certain industries as far as seasonality goes, in particular. Done a lot of work in fashion, and like early in my e-commerce career, fashion was kind of my bread and butter. So I got used to kind of the seasonality of it. It was spring, summer, autumn, winter, and you're always working like a season ahead, if not 2 seasons ahead. I think there are certain other verticals that will get a little bit, almost get a little bit caught out, and it'll be great. We're selling really well. We're selling really well. We're selling really well. Cool. Until we're not. And then they're in a state of panic. Best example of that, I think, was kind of the Peloton effect during the pandemic.
Yeah.
You know, brilliant. Everyone, they can't go to the gym. They're locked in their houses. Of course, they're going to be looking for things to do to occupy their time and to get the kind of the fitness kind of addressed. And it almost seemed like it came as a surprise to them when lockdown ended that actually their sales trajectory stalled. And it would have been very, very easy to predict. And I'm saying this from the outside looking in. So I don't know what conversations were had internally, but there was a lot of comment about that and other kind of pandemic boom businesses kind of around that time.
Yeah.
But yeah, that kind of looking forward in probably short, mid, long term and constantly asking yourself how that has changed.
Really good. I'm going to do the questions we ask every guest. More of a quick fire round. So what detail of retail do you like the most?
What detail of retail? I like the fact that it's all very numbers based. It's almost like you've got a high score.
Yeah.
You can gamify your entire career if you want to in retail, and that appeals to me.
And what detail of retail would you most want to change?
I think it's got to come back to the mistakes people make around culture, right? The thinking that you can buy a solution, whether that solution is the right fit or not, and it'll just automatically make your business better.
Nice. Yeah. Short-term, easy thinking.
Yeah, exactly.
What's your most controversial prediction for the future of retail?
I don't know how controversial it is anymore, but I've been thinking for a while that actually having a website is going to become less important than having a catalog that taps into an already established need.
Okay. Awesome. And what's your craziest story from working in retail and e-commerce thus far?
I mean, I have so many crazy stories. I started out working in Formula One, and that was my first kind of retail experience. Literally one day, the Queen walked past my desk. They're just sitting there doing some nerdy coding. Look up, oh, it's the Queen. So yeah, that was back when I was at McLaren, and they had like a royal opening for their corporate headquarters, which was where I was based at the time.
Do you often bring the Queen with you to meetings nowadays?
She's always here, man, on the shoulder.
Appreciate that. Dan Coleman, thank you so much for coming on the Retailers Detail podcast.
Oh, it's been a pleasure. I've enjoyed it. Thanks for having me.
That's it for today's episode of Retail is Detail. This episode was brought to you by Loxa, the Klarna for insurance, protecting every retail customer everywhere. We support retailers in offering product protection on all major platforms, online and in-store, on all insurable categories. Visit loxacover.com to find out more. You can catch previous episodes on YouTube, Spotify, or Apple Podcasts, or at retailersdetailpodcast.com. I've been your host, Jamie Hamer. Thanks for listening, and see you next Monday.